If you enjoy stories about family bonds tested and strengthened, we welcome you to join our growing community on the Tales List channel. My name is Evelyn. I'm very similar to me anyways. I have my eyes in the room. The story I'm about to share begins in what should have been a moment of family unity, but instead became the catalyst for uncovering painful truths and fighting for justice. For 9 years, I maintained what I believed was a loving relationship with my parents, though I occasionally noticed subtle differences in how they treated my daughter compared to my brother's children. The day of my grandfather's will reading revealed not just financial disparities, but a heartbreaking exclusion that would challenge everything I thought I knew about family, loyalty, and the meaning of inheritance. The scene was my parents' formal dining room in their Boston brownstone, a space that had always felt more like a museum exhibit than a family home. Heavy velvet curtains framed the windows, and portraits of stern-looking ancestors seemed to watch our every move. We had been summoned for what my mother described as important family matter regarding your grandfather's legacy. My husband, Michael, held our 8-year-old daughter Clara's hand as we entered, his protective instincts already on high alert. Clara wore the dress she normally reserved for birthday parties, her small face bright with anticipation at seeing her grandparents. The air smelled of lemon polish and old books, and the tension was palpable as my father stood at the head of the mahogany table, legal documents spread before him, like a general planning his campaign. My brother David and his family occupied one side of the table, their 3 children remarkably still and well-behaved in their formal wear. My sister Elizabeth sat beside me, her husband absent due to work commitments. My father began reading the will in a monotone voice, listing various bequests to charities and distant relatives, before moving to the family distributions. It was during the explanation of a substantial trust fund established for David's eldest son that Clara, confused by the legal terminology, tugged gently on my mother's sleeve. "Grandmother," she whispered, "what does beneficiary mean?" My mother's response would echo in our minds for months afterward, delivered with an icy calm that froze the room. "Beneficiaries are people who truly matter to the family, dear," my mother said, not bothering to lower her voice. "Now please don't interrupt your grandfather." The words hung in the air, sharp and cruel. I watched as Clara's face crumpled, her understanding of the world shifting in that single moment. Michael immediately pulled our daughter onto his lap, his arms wrapping around her as she began to cry quietly against his shoulder. My father continued reading, as if nothing had happened, detailing trust funds for each of David's children, while making no mention of Clara or Elizabeth's 2 boys. The systematic exclusion was so blatant it felt surreal, like watching a play where the characters suddenly break from their script to reveal hidden malice. When my father finished reading, the silence felt heavier than any sound. Michael was the first to speak, his voice tight with controlled anger. "I notice there's no mention of Clara in these documents." My father removed his reading glasses, his expression impassive. "The distributions reflect your grandfather's wishes and our family structure," he said, as if explaining something obvious to a slow child. My mother added, "Some relationships are naturally closer than others, Michael. You must understand that." That's when I noticed David studying the pattern on the Persian rug, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The pieces began clicking into place. This wasn't an oversight, but a deliberate pattern years in the making. The car ride home was filled with Clara's quiet sniffles, and my own stunned silence. Michael's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his jaw clenched so tight I feared he might damage his teeth. That night, after we'd finally comforted Clara to sleep with promises that she was deeply loved and valued, Michael went to his home office and began what would become a months-long investigation. As a forensic accountant, he had both the skills and access to databases that could uncover patterns others might miss. He started with property records, then moved to financial filings, building a picture that grew more disturbing with each passing day. What Michael discovered over the next fortnight was a web of financial maneuvering that took our breath away. My parents hadn't just written Clara out of my grandfather's will, they had been systematically transferring assets for years. creating elaborate trust structures that heavily favored David's family, while minimizing what Elizabeth's children and Clara would receive. The will we'd heard read was merely the tip of an iceberg, the final piece of a comprehensive estate plan designed to disinherit certain branches of the family while enriching others. The cold calculation behind these moves suggested this wasn't spontaneous decision-making, but a long-term strategy. The emotional impact on Clara became our primary concern. She started having nightmares, waking up crying that she wasn't a real family member. Her schoolwork suffered, as she withdrew from friends and activities she previously loved. We enrolled her in therapy, recognizing that the emotional damage required professional intervention. Meanwhile, we reached out to Elizabeth, who had also noticed troubling patterns in how her parents treated her children compared to David's. Together, we compared notes and realized the financial disparities reflected deeper relational inequalities that had existed for years, just beneath the surface of family gatherings and holiday celebrations. Confronting my parents was one of the most difficult moments of my life. We arranged a meeting at their home, bringing documentation of the financial patterns Michael had uncovered. My mother's response was defensive from the beginning. "We have every right to distribute our assets as we see fit." When I mentioned how their actions had devastated Clara, my mother responded, "Children need to learn that life isn't always fair, Evelyn. You're being overly sentimental." My father remained largely silent, his posture rigid, his eyes avoiding mine. The meeting ended with my mother's cold pronouncement, "If you choose to pursue this, you'll be destroying the family, not us." The legal journey began with consultations from an estate attorney named Sarah Jenkins, who specialized in inheritance disputes and fiduciary law. She reviewed our documentation and identified several potential legal avenues, including lack of testamentary capacity, undue influence, and violation of the principle of natural affection, the legal concept that parents should generally provide for their children, absent compelling reasons not to. She explained that while parents have considerable discretion in estate planning, the courts could intervene when distributions appeared arbitrary, capricious, or designed to punish certain family members without rational basis, particularly when minor grandchildren were involved. As we move forward with legal action, the family fractures deepened dramatically. David accused us of greed and destroying family harmony, echoing our mother's words. Old family friends called, urging us to drop this nonsense for everyone's sake. What these well-meaning people failed to understand was that the harmony they wanted to preserve was built on the silence and acceptance of unfair treatment. We weren't willing to sacrifice our daughter's sense of belonging and self-worth for the appearance of family unity. Each legal filing felt like a betrayal of my upbringing, yet necessary to protect what truly mattered. The discovery process revealed emails and financial records that painted a disturbing picture. David had been serving as our parents' financial advisor for nearly a decade, during which time he had systematically encouraged them to consolidate family assets and protect the family legacy by concentrating wealth with his children. The paper trail showed he had actively participated in estate planning meetings where the disinheritance of our children was discussed and rationalized. Meanwhile, we submitted therapist reports detailing Clara's emotional distress as evidence of the very real harm caused by this exclusion. Elizabeth and her husband Mark joined our legal challenge after discovering their children had also been largely excluded, though not as completely as Clara. Together, we formed a united front that clearly surprised our parents and David. The family now stood clearly divided, our parents and David's family on one side, Elizabeth's family and ours on the other. Extended family members found themselves pressured to choose sides, with many withdrawing completely to avoid the conflict. The price of pursuing justice was becoming increasingly clear with each passing week. The case took an unexpected turn when we discovered our grandfather's original will, drafted 5 years before his death, which provided equal distributions to all grandchildren. A paralegal at the law firm that had prepared the subsequent wills came forward with concerns about undue influence. providing documentation showing our parents had changed attorneys multiple times until they found one willing to draft the exclusionary documents. This discovery strengthened our case significantly, suggesting our grandfather's true intentions had been subverted in his final years, when his mental capacity was declining. Mediation was court-ordered, and we spent 3 exhausting days in a conference room with a retired judge serving as mediator. Our parents remained largely silent while David and his attorney did most of the talking, framing the estate plan as rewarding children who maintained close family relationships. They presented photos of David's family on vacations with our parents, contrasted with our more limited contact due to geographical distance and work commitments. The mediator seemed initially sympathetic to their argument, until we presented evidence showing our parents had repeatedly declined our invitations and created scheduling conflicts. The emotional toll on our immediate family was substantial. Michael and I argued over legal strategies and the mounting costs, both financial and emotional. Clara's therapy sessions revealed deepening insecurities about her place in the world beyond just our family. I began having stress-related health issues, waking up with migraines and battling insomnia. There were moments I considered abandoning the fight, but then I would remember Clara's face in that dining room, and my resolve would harden. This was no longer about money, it was about fundamental fairness and our daughter's right to feel she belonged. A breakthrough came when we located a former caregiver who had worked with my grandfather during his final 2 years. She provided a sworn statement describing how our parents had limited her access to my grandfather in his final months, and had numerous whispered conversations with David about making sure everything was in order. She recalled my grandfather asking repeatedly about all the grandchildren and expressing concern that everyone be treated fairly. This testimony directly contradicted our parents' claims that my grandfather had made these decisions with full mental capacity and clear intent. As the court date approached, our parents' legal team began making settlement offers, first small, then increasingly substantial. They clearly wanted to avoid a public trial that would air family secrets and potentially result in even more unfavorable outcomes. We consulted with Elizabeth and Mark, and after much discussion, we decided we were willing to settle if the terms provided fair treatment for all the grandchildren. Not just financial compensation, but also acknowledgement of the emotional harm caused. The principle had become more important than the money. The settlement negotiations were tense and stretched over several weeks. Our parents refused to acknowledge any wrongdoing but eventually agreed to establish equal trust funds for Clara and Elizabeth's children, matching what they had provided for David's children. They also agreed to family therapy sessions, though they approached this requirement with obvious reluctance. The financial compensation, while substantial, felt hollow compared to what we had truly lost: the belief that family meant unconditional love and acceptance, that blood ties created bonds that couldn't be broken by arbitrary preference. The family therapy sessions were painful, but ultimately transformative. In our 3rd session, my mother broke down and admitted she had always felt competitive with me, resenting that I had built a perfect life with Michael and Clara. My father revealed he felt overshadowed by Michael's professional success and had allowed the estate planning to become a way to level the playing field. These revelations, while shocking, began to make sense of the senseless. The estate dispute wasn't really about money or inheritance, but about unacknowledged jealousy and unresolved family dynamics. The healing process for Clara was slow but steady. With continued therapy and our consistent reinforcement of her value and belonging, she gradually regained her confidence. We created new family traditions that emphasized what we valued: open communication, mutual respect, and the understanding that family isn't defined by genetics alone, but by chosen commitment to one another's well-being. Michael and I grew closer through the ordeal, our marriage strengthened by having navigated such difficult territory together, and emerged with our priorities clarified. Our relationship with Elizabeth and her family deepened significantly through the shared experience. We vacationed together, celebrated holidays together, and created the supportive family network our parents had failed to provide. The cousins grew close, forming bonds that we hoped would withstand whatever challenges the future might bring. David and his family remained distant, though we left the door open for reconciliation if they ever chose to walk through it. The family landscape had been permanently altered, but not entirely for the worse. The experience transformed my approach to parenting and the values I want to instill in Clara. We talk openly about fairness, justice, and the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. We've taught her that inheritance isn't just about money, but about the legacy of values we pass down: integrity, compassion, and the commitment to treat all people with dignity, regardless of their status or relationship to us. These lessons, born from pain, have become the most valuable inheritance we could possibly give her. Professionally, the experience changed how I approach my work as a library director. I've become more attentive to ensuring our resources and programs are truly inclusive, that no child or family feels excluded or doesn't count. I've developed collections and programs that celebrate diverse family structures and address difficult topics like rejection and belonging in age-appropriate ways. The pain we experienced has become a source of empathy that informs my work daily, allowing me to create spaces where everyone feels they matter. Now, 2 years later, the wounds have scarred over but still occasionally ache. Clara, now 10, has emerged as a confident, empathetic child who stands up for classmates she sees being excluded. My relationship with my parents remains complicated, cordial but distant, with carefully maintained boundaries. The financial settlement has been secured in trust for Clara's education and future, but the true value lies in knowing we fought for her right to be treated as an equal member of the family. The cost was high, but the principle was worth it. The legal battle prompted unexpected positive changes in our extended family as well. Several cousins reached out to share their own experiences of exclusion and to thank us for taking a stand. A great aunt revised her own estate plan to ensure equal treatment of all her descendants, citing our case as inspiration. The ripple effects of our decision to challenge unfair treatment extended far beyond our immediate situation, creating more equitable outcomes throughout the family system, and potentially preventing similar pain for future generations. What I've learned through this journey is that silence in the face of injustice only perpetuates harm. The appearance of family harmony is worthless if it requires some members to accept second-class status. True family embraces all its members with equal love and respect, and when that ideal isn't met, we have both a right and responsibility to advocate for change. The process may be painful, the outcomes uncertain, but the alternative, accepting that some family members don't count, is ultimately more damaging to everyone involved. To anyone facing similar family challenges, I would say this: document everything, seek professional guidance early, and remember that you're advocating not just for financial fairness, but for emotional justice. The legal system, while imperfect, exists in part to protect vulnerable family members from arbitrary exclusion. More importantly, your children are watching how you respond to unfair treatment. You're teaching them what to accept and what to challenge in their own lives. Your fight, however difficult, becomes part of their inheritance too. Our story continues to evolve, with new chapters being written as Clara grows and our family redefines itself on healthier terms. The pain of that day in the dining room has diminished, but remains part of our family narrative, not as a source of bitterness, but as a reminder of what we fought to protect. The inheritance that matters most wasn't in those legal documents, but in the values we demonstrated through our actions: that every family member counts, that fairness matters, and that love means fighting for each other's dignity. If stories about family resilience and justice resonate with you, we invite you to join our community on the Tales List channel, where we share more experiences like this one. Thank you for listening to our journey. However your own family story unfolds, may you find the courage to protect what matters most, and the wisdom to know that some battles, however painful, are worth fighting for the ones you love.